Robert had always been a man who needed to know what came next. 58 years of living had trained him to plan every detail, anticipate every outcome, and keep his world carefully ordered. But that September evening, as he sat in his study, watching the amber light fade through the window, something unfamiliar stirred within him, a quiet shift. Something inside had changed. It had begun 3 months earlier, the day Caroline walked into the community center where Robert volunteered. Her silver hair shimmered in the sunlight, and the lavender cardigan she wore reminded him of his grandmother's garden. She was there to sign up for a pottery class. But between the confusion of forms and schedules, they ended up talking for nearly an hour. "I don't plan anymore," she'd said with a soft laugh, her blue eyes glinting with warmth. "I spent 40 years planning, now I just see what happens." The comment had unsettled him at first. It sounded careless, reckless even. But there was something about Caroline's calm certainty that made him realize how long it had been since he'd allowed himself to simply exist in the moment. When she listened, she gave her whole attention. When she laughed, it was real and unguarded. Over the next several weeks, they fell into a comfortable rhythm: coffee on Tuesday mornings, walks by the river on Saturdays. Robert learned she'd been married for over 3 decades before her husband passed, that she had 2 children living out of state, and that she'd taken up painting landscapes at 55 because it was something she'd always wanted to do but never found time for. "What about you?" she asked one morning as they sat on a bench overlooking the water. "What did you always want to do?" Robert thought about it. He'd been an accountant, a good one. He'd built a stable life, provided for his family, and watched his daughter graduate with pride. But when had he last done something just because he wanted to? "I don't really know anymore," he admitted quietly. Caroline didn't press. She simply smiled and handed him half of her blueberry muffin. The change came quietly. Robert found himself checking his watch less when he was with her. He stopped rehearsing his words before speaking. Silence between them no longer felt awkward, it felt peaceful. One warm evening in late August, Caroline invited him to dinner at her home. Her house was nothing like his neatly arranged townhouse. Books were stacked on tables, half-finished paintings leaned against walls, and mismatched dishes filled the cupboards. It should have made him uneasy, but instead, he felt as though he could finally breathe. "I'm not much of a cook," she confessed, stirring something fragrant on the stove. "But I do enjoy trying." The meal was simple pasta with vegetables from her garden, fresh bread from the bakery down the street, and a bottle of red wine she'd picked because she liked the label. They ate on her porch as twilight melted into night, and Robert couldn't remember the last time food had tasted that good. After dinner, they sat together on the porch swing. Children's laughter floated in from a nearby yard. Caroline tucked her feet beneath her and looked at him. "Can I tell you something?" she asked softly. "Of course. I'm glad I met you, Robert," she said, smiling faintly. "You remind me it's okay to take things slow." He blinked, surprised. "I thought I was too slow. Too cautious." "No," she said, reaching for his hand. "You're thoughtful. There's a difference. You notice things. Most people rush through life and miss the important parts." Her hand felt natural in his, like something that had always been meant to happen. They sat in silence as the stars appeared one by one across the sky. In the weeks that followed, their connection deepened not with the intensity of youth, but with something steadier and more profound. They shared dinners, old movies, and long talks about the lives they'd lived. Caroline spoke openly about her late husband, the joys and struggles of marriage, and how love, she'd learned, was not about perfection, but acceptance. "My husband used to drive me crazy with his spontaneity." She laughed one night as they washed dishes. "He'd come home and suddenly say we were going to the coast for the weekend. No plans, no packing, just go. It terrified me at first." "What changed?" Robert asked. "I realized he wasn't being reckless," she said. "He was asking me to trust him and to trust us. When I finally did, some of our best memories came from those unplanned trips." Her words lingered with Robert. He'd spent his life avoiding uncertainty, believing control kept him safe. But now he began to wonder if all that control had only kept him from truly living. One Saturday, he called her and said, "Get in the car. I have an idea." She laughed. "Where are we going?" "I don't know," he said. "Let's just drive and see." They drove north along the coast highway, windows down, the salty air filling the car. They stopped at a small antique shop in a town he'd passed 100 times but never explored. Caroline found a blue glass vase she loved, and without thinking, he bought it for her. Lunch was at a roadside diner with the best pie he'd ever tasted. Later, they walked along a quiet beach, collecting bits of sea glass. As the sun began to sink, they sat together on a piece of driftwood, watching waves roll in. Caroline rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For this? For letting go a little. It feels good," he admitted. "Scary, but good." "The best things usually are," she said, smiling. That night, back at her home, they stood in the kitchen making tea. Carolyn moved easily through the space, humming softly. Robert watched her, memorizing the small details the way she smiled without realizing it. The lightness in her movements. Stay, she said gently. Not looking at him, his heart quickened. I'm not asking for anything complicated, she added softly. I just don't want you to go yet. I want to fall asleep knowing you're here. They moved to the couch, and she curled against him. The conversation drifted into silence, and soon her breathing slowed as she fell asleep against his chest. He held her carefully, afraid to move. In that quiet, Robert finally understood what she had been teaching him all along. Long love wasn't about control. It was about courage. About choosing to stay open even when nothing was certain. When Caroline stirred awake an hour later, she looked up at him with a sleepy smile. You stayed? Of course I stayed, he said softly. She took his hands in hers. I need to tell you something. I'm falling in love with you. I know we're both old enough to be cautious, but I don't want to waste time pretending I don't feel it. His throat tightened. I'm falling in love with you too, he whispered, and it terrifies me. Good, she murmured. That means it matters. They sat in the soft glow of the living room, holding hands like two people rediscovering what it meant to truly be seen. All his life, Robert had feared losing control. But sitting there with Caroline, he realized that letting go didn't mean falling apart. It meant allowing things to finally fall into place. That night, when she asked him to stay again, he did. Not out of impulse, but out of trust. Out of love. And for the first time in years, Robert stopped thinking about what came next, simply lived the moment he was in.